Hello and welcome to this video. Today I am joined with my good friend Amos to talk about philosophy and theology at Oxford. So today we're going to start off with talking about, well, what is philosophy and theology, Amos?
So let's just run through the definitions. Philosophia, love of wisdom. That's one. But that doesn't capture what philosophy is in the actual world, because most professional philosophers are like in it for money and prestige and ideas, but not love of wisdom per se. There's also like Alvin Plantinga's definition, which is just philosophy is thinking really hard about stuff, but that's not philosophy because that applies to science and maths as well. I'm not sure what a good definition of philosophy is other than just defining it by ostension. Like philosophers are doing it, so we just point to that, and if they call it philosophy, it's probably philosophy.
Do you think that kind of ties into the idea where it used to be such a kind of a niche thing, but with society becoming so broad, or with so many new schools of thoughts arriving or modes of inquiry arriving, it kind of has gotten so broad that it's almost we have to redefine philosophy in some sense when you think about actually what is philosophy, because you could think back at Aristotle. At those times, they didn't have like quantum mechanical kind of engineers and computers. So now we have philosophy as in perhaps more general philosophy, epistemology, all these different small things, which of course we'll get into a bit later on in this video. But perhaps let's turn on to the other side of our course, which is theology. What actually is theology and what are we studying in theology?
So I guess we're studying God and things directly related to God. So like if you can write a sentence that begins with God did X or God is X, then that statement falls under theology.
Yes. Perhaps someone might be looking at this course and say, well, actually, I'm really interested in developing my relationship with God, but will I actually get it in theology? Because of course, when people enter into this theological pursuit, they seem to think that it's going to be like this spiritual, almost monastic tradition where you end up in like this. I suppose I have this kind of medieval conception of a theologian, Thomas Aquinas, writing in a monastery or something along those lines. But it seems that theology seems to be way more academic, perhaps, than perhaps religion per se. What would be your thoughts about that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that studying theology will lead me to a relationship with God. I was an agnostic before I started at Oxford. In the second week, I became a theist, so I'm on a good trajectory. But I guess I'll find out whether it actually does help. I mean, yeah, I guess like on an abstract level, like knowing about the person you're in a relationship with is important for developing a relationship, but that's about it. I don't know what to say.
So what would you say are some things that we've been learning? Now we've talked a bit about what is philosophy and theology in general. What are the things that we've actually been learning as part of this course?
So we together have been taking, the only course we've been taking at the same time is the figure of Jesus through the centuries. So we're starting with the figure of Jesus in the Gospels, and then we're sort of going all the way up until John Donne and everything in between. So like the medieval theologians, and then before that, like the different conciliar statements on Jesus' relationship to the Father and the Holy Spirit, the Trinity. We're doing slightly different electives. I'm doing biblical Hebrew. Yeah,
and I'm doing introduction to the study of the Bible. And the reason why I did introduction to the study of the Bible was because I was a bit too let's just say I was a bit too lazy to try to learn a new language. And what I've heard from my friends, and perhaps you could elaborate on it a bit more, learning a language has been very, very tough. I've only had to attend one lecture a week for that. So perhaps you could elaborate on it more. How is it to study a language in Oxford, especially maybe Hebrew?
It's pretty crazy. I mean, because all of the ancient languages, there's a requirement that you don't have any experience in the language before you start it. And so it's a whole new alphabet. I think Hebrew is especially tricky just in terms of like the grammar and the alphabet. So we definitely do more than an hour a week. We're told to do at least an hour of revision on our own a day, and then we also have 3 hour-long tutorials per week with our class. Mine's about 5 people, and the instructor. Shout out to Kieran.
If you're watching this, you sound like a phenomenal guy. But on another note, how would you say it is kind of adapting into studying Hebrew, or just a new language? Would you say it's been a challenging but fun experience, or has it been like really, really tough, and at times you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here?
It has been fun, but it has been challenging. I'm not really a linguist. I don't speak any other languages. I dropped French after GCSE. That's as far as I went. But yeah, everyone else in my class has pretty much learned another language apart from one. So I'm sort of on the back foot, but I'm trying.
So would you say? I mean, I suppose we all got that email before we even started. Which additional optional paper would you want to do? The Introduction to the Study of the Bible or these languages? Would you recommend, if you were going back to that time, would you recommend that to say actually doing a language is quite good, or would you say actually the workload in Oxford is quite tough? Maybe you should start off with Introduction to the Study of the Bible and then move on to Hebrew or Greek?
I don't know. It's been hard. I've never felt sort of comfortable, but then again, I've never felt completely overwhelmed. So I think it is doable. I would recommend doing Hebrew. I think if I could have recommended another one, it would have been Religion and Religions, which is just an intro to comparative religions course. I think you do 4 religions that aren't Christianity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think perhaps we could talk a bit more about choosing those electives, because of course in Oxford, our first year is a bit more strict, or at least well-defined, than the next years we could choose to have more elective courses. But when you're applying to philosophy and theology, what you're going to notice is that the philosophy course is going to be general philosophy, logic, moral philosophy, and you don't really have much choice within that apart from, do you have that choice to do either 4 weeks of logic classes or 8 weeks of logic classes?
If I have had that choice, it wasn't revealed to me.
Yes. Well, perhaps I've just shot all the Oriel professors in the foot here by revealing this possibility. But in fact,
yeah, I mean, it would make sense. I think it may be a thing that varies from college to college.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I think we do have to do all 8 weeks of logic, but then in our prelims and the final exams for year 1, we can just choose to focus on the part of logic that's the first 4 chapters.
Yeah.
It's looking like that's going to be what I do.
Yes, indeed. Yes, that seems to be the case as well. But though I do intend to try to approach the second 8 chapters, well, the second 4 chapters, and when we're talking about chapters, we're talking about the Logic Manual by Volker Halbach, and we'll talk a bit more about possible books you might need to read, or not necessarily need to read, but books you might want to look at when you are choosing to apply for philosophy and theology, or any course relating to philosophy in general. And I'll probably raise that book. It's somewhere behind me, but it is, we're referring to this book called The Logic Manual by Volker Halbach, which is kind of a required set text for you to read when you're studying Introduction to Logic papers. However, building on that, what would you say is, well, how do you find the philosophy side of things? Do you think that is difficult? How have you felt about studying philosophy, and what kind of inspirations has it given you?
So this term I haven't actually studied any philosophy apart from doing the lectures. So I've done logic. It feels more like maths. I don't feel like I'm doing philosophy when I'm doing logic. So the philosophy I'm doing is all just like in my own time. So I still find time to read and write and stuff. But yeah, as far as what's related to the course, it hasn't felt very philosophical. I think next term it will be. We'll do general philosophy, just like a guided tour of the 8 biggest problems in philosophy. And
have you been attending the general philosophy lectures though?
I attended the first 2.
Yes.
Give me a break.
Yeah. Well, and that's something which you should notice when you're watching this from home, is that every single college does things differently. So I've had to do the Figure of Jesus tutorials and the general philosophy tutorials this term. So I've actually already had like 6 tutorials on general philosophy. So you just want to bear in mind that when you're applying to a college, and I don't think you actually get to know about the structure of how they teach each course before you apply, but still each college does indeed have their different kind of ways to present the course and to teach a course. That's something you want to keep in mind. But perhaps turning on to the other side of things, how are you finding theology?
Theology I'm really, really enjoying. I really like the tutorials. Our tutor is sort of reintroducing this ancient tradition where you have to wear your commoner's gown to tutorials, and it's like this long flowing like Dementor kind of ribbon robe thing that you wear when you matriculate and when you attend formal dinners and like any other formal occasion. I don't know, yeah, they've been really fun. I like essay writing is something I'm better at than like non-verbal reasoning, which I'm horrendous at. So I found the theology side much easier this time.
So perhaps what are some of the topics you've done in theology? Are these related to the Figure of Jesus?
Yeah, only related to the Figure of Jesus. Like Hebrew, obviously it circles around to theology when you can actually read biblical text, but I can't read biblical text yet. I can just like pass like little words and like read sentences. So
perhaps we can turn on to kind of from the individual kind of subjects to kind of more of an overarching thing. How are lectures at Oxford University? I suppose a lot of people might be interested in this. A lot of people attend these universities. Like, we got some lectures coming up. I'm very excited for that. How have the lectures been for you?
So there are some lectures I go to out of desperation, like Volker's lectures.
Yes.
Those are necessary.
Yes, I haven't attended two actually. So.
I mean, to be fair, they're probably not necessary because he just puts the chapters of the book on a slideshow and essentially reads them out. But I feel like I just need the topic to wash over my brain before I can read the chapter and understand it. And I still don't understand it. Otherwise, the philosophy lectures, they've been good, but they're on a Wednesday, and that's when all of my work is just crammed into one day, and I have to get it done, so I can't attend. The moral philosophy lectures, I don't know if you've been to many of those, but they are insane. They are brilliant. They're
I don't know how to explain this. And if you are thinking about applying to Oxford, you really should come just for this moral philosophy lecture and apply before the guy disappears and stops doing them. But they are of a different kind, I have to say. And I don't think I can disclose too much lest I get this channel revoked by Oxford University.
Yeah.
But they are truly one of a kind, and they do brighten up your dreary Friday mood, I suppose.
Yeah, the guy is basically a comedian. It's absolutely brilliant. The thing which he drinks in class, I don't know if we should say much about that.
Yes, I don't think we could say much about anything which goes on this in this lecture, lest we get demonetized. Though I have to say that is definitely the lecture that I do attend every single week, like a religion. Apart from all the other lectures, which I occasionally show up and occasionally do not. And perhaps we could talk a bit more about this. Do you think it is necessary to turn up to all lectures in Oxford?
I do not. So I think it may be beneficial to like attend all of them if it's just out of a principle of like doing everything, and then that might mean that you do everything in other areas of your academic life as well. If you're not gonna be that amazing, I think it's not necessary to attend all lectures because they usually don't help with the essay. What helps most with the essay is the primary reading.
Yes.
And if you have a time clash with some work you actually need to get done, it's just not the most efficient way to get through your essay.
I thoroughly agree with you on that. I genuinely think that going to lectures, although it's nice, you realize that it actually isn't very important, especially I think for the Oxford experience. I think this might be a reason why Oxford is so unique, is precisely because, well, if you compare it to another school like maybe UCL or something like that, they don't really have these tutorial sessions. They don't really have these essay writings. And as a result, all the information is tied directly to kind of the lecture that you have to attend. But then with us, we have so many materials and different ways to interact with professors, and as a result, lectures drop in value significantly. I'm not saying that they're horrible. If you're interested in attending them, feel free to go attend them. But I'm just saying that you don't need to be expecting to actually attend every single lecture. Now, tying to the lectures, how are you finding tutorials so far, especially in philosophy and theology?
Loving them. So, I mean, logic cheats just because of the content are incredibly grueling. But I do love my tutor. He's really, really good. My Hebrew tutorials are also lovely. Again, shout out to Kian, lovely man. And my theology cheats. Yeah, they've been great as well. For my first, I think 3 or 4, I had them just one-on-one. Just because of the way the timetabling was done, and so like most people thought, like that's going to be like really intense. It was actually pretty great. I got through way more stuff, and sometimes I got through less stuff because I just go into like really deep arguments. So what in one of my cheats, I just completely diverted from, I think, the Council of Chalcedon to like arguing about the metaphysics of modality for about 40 minutes, and it was completely unrelated, but it was super fun. So
yes, definitely. And it's quite interesting you raised the Council of Chalcedon, because we actually didn't have that in our 8 tutorials. We actually didn't cover the Council of Chalcedon at all. I think we did. What were the 8 essays we did? We did one on Docetism. We did one on Anselm, Julian of Norwich, and then we did. I actually can't remember most of them.
We didn't do Julian of Norwich or
Docetism. No. Did you do the one on Strauss, or did you do Bultmann instead?
Neither.
Yeah. So I suppose that illustrates quite a lot about the individual college nature of of Oxford, it really is about kind of how your individual college structures it and also how your college kind of teaches it. Because although we're doing the same course, he's clearly learning a significantly different amount of material as I am. So it really depends on who you're working with and who you're interacting with when you are kind of applying it to the course. Now, perhaps we move on a bit further and say, well, what are some of the books you would say are helpful in applying to philosophy or theology, or someone who's interested in getting into this course?
So I think Oxford has a long list of kind of introductory text or classic texts. I think if you're new to philosophy, you should read those. I think if you already have established interest in philosophy, you should just carry on exploring your own rabbit holes. I think that's much better. It's much more authentic. And I think all of the questions that I feel like I answered well in my interview were from just self-study of things I was interested in. So just read what's fun.
Definitely. I agree with you on the philosophy point in that sense, just because I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to your interview, and in your interview, you want to come off as authentic. Like you could read all the general introduction to philosophy textbooks, but at the same time, you're either if that's your main point of the interview, it's kind of expected that you have some knowledge of general philosophy. But if you could really start talking about kind of the different rabbit holes you've been studying or things you've really been interested in, then you can really develop it further. Now, that's not to say that there aren't any texts which don't help or don't help specifically. I do think that you guys can check out Descartes' Meditation and Hume's Dialogues of Natural. What's it called? Inquiry into Human Reasoning. Is that what the Hume work is called? Something. Let me check. It's Hume's An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. That's it. Those have come up quite a lot in our general philosophy course as part of our reading. Of course, you should go check out. I feel bad of promoting his book, but because that's going to give him more money, I should get an affiliate link for that, so I might make some money off it. But go check out Volker Halbach's Logic Manual. I mean, if you understand everything which goes on in that work before you even get into Oxford, I say I'll give you a good, huge hand of applause because, well, you clearly know more about logic than I do, I think. And also that is basically what you need to do for the logic course. But for the theology side, it's very difficult to recommend anything just because a lot of the primary sources just go anywhere and without actually knowing what your teacher is going to teach. It's very difficult to actually know what you're actually going to do for that.
I mean, one thought is just to read the most important religious texts. I mean, I remember on the theology group chat, people, when they were starting their degree, they were saying, hey guys, I haven't read the Bible yet, should I? And I think maybe you should.
Yeah.
Not just the Bible though, like I'm sort of making my way through the Book of Mormon at the moment. Like I think you should read a whole bunch. But just read the originals, I think. That's super important.
Before carrying on with this interview, I'd like to ask you a question. You raised something very fascinating, saying you went from an agnostic to a theist since you've gotten here. Can you tell me a bit more about this? Because that's something I'm very curious about.
Yeah, well, it's a tale as old as time. So I was reflecting on the argument from Psychophysical Harmony. Would
you please explain to the viewers who may not know what the argument from Psychophysical Harmony is?
So if you wanna go into it more, there are a bunch of interviews on it with Justin Crummett and with Brian Cutter. They co-authored a paper recently. It's currently unpublished, but it's in its preprint version, which you can read online. And so the idea is essentially there is a very fortunate matchup between our mental states and physical states. So the psychophysical laws, the laws that govern the relationship between consciousness and the physical world, result in psychophysical harmony. So when we see things, those things are actually there. When we're stabbed, we feel pain instead of pleasure. Now, conceivably, the laws could have been completely different and disharmonious, such that all I ever saw was static, and all I ever felt was the feeling of tepid bathwater, and all I ever heard was Nirvana playing in my ears over and over again. And it seems like some of these ways the psychophysical laws could have been are actually intrinsically more probable than the ones we observe now, like because there are ones that are way simpler. You could have just seen the color black and heard a single noise and felt a single feeling. And the psychophysical laws conceivably could have been that way, and so it's incredibly surprising that they're not, and that they appear to be so finely tuned for harmony now. Or like on a hypothesis of naturalism, on atheism, this is very surprising because presumably on naturalism the universe is indifferent to like producing particular goods. Whereas on theism it's not ridiculously surprising. because presumably God, if he is going to create creatures, would want creatures who can interact with the world properly and whose mental states match up with physical states in rationally appropriate ways.
Yes. So would you say that this is kind of a development of the fine-tuning argument?
It is, but for the mind, and it also doesn't fall into any of the same pitfalls as the fine-tuning argument. So that there are some weaknesses of the fine-tuning argument that this argument just doesn't share. So one, for example, is you can undercut the inference from fine-tuning to theism with the simulation hypothesis. It predicts the data presumably just as well. But with this argument, it's about much more fundamental metaphysical laws, psychophysical laws. And so if we're positing that a species of intelligent humans or aliens fine-tune the universe with a simulation, then we'd want to explain their psychophysical harmony.
So before we carry on talking about your transition from agnosticism to theism, perhaps, I would just like to give a quick shout out to Luke Barnes, who came on my channel a few days ago. I haven't actually published that video yet, but you can hear the full recording of that on my podcast, Dostoevsky and Us. I have uploaded it there. However, if you do want the full video, then wait a few days and I'll upload it when I actually get time to actually edit the video. But carrying on with your journey from agnosticism to theism, do you think it was your course in being at Oxford which helped it? Or would you say it was kind of just, it just so happened that occurred when you were at Oxford?
No, I think it just so happened that it occurred when I was at Oxford. I don't think there was any relation, Maybe it was the sight of all the churches that made me change my feelings towards the argument. But I think I'd just been thinking about it for a few months, and there were lots of different issues to sort out. And I just realized at some point at 12:05 on a Tuesday night that I was more convinced than not.
When you say you're a theist, would you say you're a Christian theist, or are you just kind of a theist simpliciter? Yeah,
just a very tentatively a theist. I think what this argument does is, for me, it puts naturalism to the side, standard forms of naturalism. It's still compatible with sort of non-theistic hypotheses, which also predict psychophysical harmony. So one might be Thomas Nagel's view that the universe is built with teleological laws, and that those develop towards valuable end states. And so that's a version of naturalism in some way, but it doesn't appeal to God. So there are other kind of theism adjacent hypotheses that predict the data as well. I guess I just think that theism wins out because it's way more intrinsically probable than some of these other views. So I'm just like a very tentative, minimal theist. I don't have a theology yet.
Now, do you think that learning theology has kind of helped you develop that theology, understanding what this theistic God is? Or would you sometimes feel that it's almost become a bit detached from that God via learning theology?
I want to say neither. No. So I don't think I've learned anything about God. Learned is a factive word. It assumes that the thing you learn is true, I guess. So conditional on Christianity being true, I guess I've learned things about God, but I'd need to believe that Christianity is true first. Right, and I'm not there yet. I need to look through the resurrection evidence, and before that, I need to establish that the prior probability of miracles is sufficiently high as to outweigh Hume's criticism. Yes,
indeed. Now, perhaps I suppose the viewers who are watching this on my uni application channel might not be too interested in the paraphysical. What's it called again?
The psychophysical
harmony argument. But I suppose what I am trying to develop here is that when you're applying to university as kind of philosophy and theology course, a lot of times people might approach it from a theistic lens, perhaps. They might be a Christian saying, I want to learn more, or maybe I want to pursue ministry, or I want to understand more and develop my relationship with God. However, since I've been here, it seems that it's being taught in a way more secular lens, and in some ways it appeals both to the theist and perhaps, a Christian theist and also a theist like you, and even an atheist, perhaps. Would you say that that's a correct kind of characterization? And perhaps when people are coming to this course, they shouldn't really expect to be, I'm suddenly becoming enlightened about the divine nature of reality, but more so, I can understand more about theistic claims, but not really about how I am using those claims to relate with God.
Yeah, that's completely right. So it is neutral in the way it's taught. I think to do well, you need to be able to get inside the mind of a Christian and believers of other religions. because otherwise you just won't be able to present their views sympathetically. Like if you can't just get inside the mind of somebody who believes in the Trinity, then you won't be able to present it in a coherent way in an essay. But I think it's done in a pretty neutral way, in a way that's challenging for theists and atheists, and also for not just between Christians and atheists, but between other religious worldviews. I mean, I won't say who, but there was an Anglican theology tutor from another college who told me, he gave me his business card and told me that if I ever wanted to study church history from a Latter-day Saint friendly perspective, I should apply to do theology with him. I think he thought I was Mormon because I was hanging around with a bunch of Mormon people at a like Mormon Anglican crossover event. But so if there are any Latter-day Saints who want to study church history from an LDS friendly perspective, you should definitely
indeed this guy yes. Strange things do happen in these courts of old, I suppose, but perhaps to slowly wrap off this this interview with you, what would you say are the top 3 things that you would give as an advice to someone who's applying to philosophy and theology?
I want to give kind of unique bits of advice that aren't just standard.
Definitely.
I want to say put a lot of effort into your personal statement. So one part of putting effort into your personal statement is like doing things that you can write about. That's obvious. Another thing is learning how to write properly. I mean, I remember when I was leaving school, I ended up, I think, proofreading, if not basically doing about 20 people's personal statements. Just, people who are my friends. And I read their personal statements and I was like, yikes, like this is not possible. And I wanted them to succeed. So I felt like a moral obligation to like write it for them, basically. With their help, it was very authentic and personal to them. But yeah, I think on that point you should just read lots of style guides, maybe like Dreher's English, Economical Writing by Deirdre McCloskey, The Elements of Style, just like all of the classic style guides, and learn how to write properly, and then you'll be able to put a personal statement in words that sound like you.
Yes, indeed. I think that's a very good tip. And before you kind of elaborate further, I would like to kind of, first of all, you guys can go check out my how to write a personal statement video that I have put on this channel. Also, if you want more detailed looks into how to write a personal statement and tips about how to actually make it sound proper, I also have a course about applying to the UCAS, which you can check out at Logos Education below, and that's definitely something you can go check out. And I do want to emphasize so much on the idea of making it sound proper, because a lot of times you can have all the best ideas within a personal statement, but sometimes the way it just comes out is just so abhorrently wrong that it makes it kind of ridiculous. And I've had to edit, like you, edit a lot of personal statements for my friends, and it's not. And when I make those changes, I rarely actually change the individual content of it. Of course, there's times where I say maybe you could read another book or something like that about it, just to give more straight through academic kind of intuition or knowledge. But at the same time, a lot of them just don't sound right. They just sound wrong. And that's something that I think is often overlooked. I think a lot of people look at it at the personal statement as something they just tick off. I've talked about 2 books, I've talked about this, and just they tick off the list. But in reality, what this truly is about is really to not only make it sound right, but actually show that you can write well. And Oxford being an essay writing school, you have to learn how to write a good essay. And that's kind of an important part about the personal statement. What would be some other things that you would do for your...
I mean, lots of advice probably isn't very applicable. Like, I mean, one thing I did, it wasn't for university, it was just for fun. Like I got into academic publishing before I started at uni. That was just something that I felt like doing. I had arguments that I wanted to present, and so I published them. I assume that helps. But like, I don't think I can start like recommending that people like start publishing in journals. That's kind of like, that's not good advice.
Yeah, definitely. You can always self-publish a book like I've done, and that also makes it, not only do you not need to edit it at all with anyone, you can just put it on Amazon and say you published a book. Just write whatever you want and throw it on Amazon. By the way, I'm actually writing a second edition to that, which will actually get properly published. So that is going to come out in a bit, maybe after Christmas or sometime then. But nevertheless, I would say do something to show that you actually are interested beyond just saying that I've read a few books, either write for your school journal or whatever it is. I mean, you might not need to go so far to write academically published works.
But essay competitions.
Yes, that does help.
Yeah.
And you don't actually need to win them, actually. I had a good friend who, well, I mean, of course it would do better if you did win them, but just to say you applied to the essay competition is normally good enough and say that I've actually written it. And at the end of the day, we all know how English works. You can always write it as a way that to say that, oh, I did very well in this competition when you actually didn't win it. But that's kind of another trick you could throw to the side, I suppose. But would you have any third tips, perhaps?
I'm wondering if we should skip on to the bit where they've got the interview.
Yes, actually, I think that's a good thing. What would be some key tips going into an interview?
So don't be nervous.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that scary. I mean, it's intense. I remember after one of my interviews with like a very sharp metaphysician, I was basically limping afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a great experience, but it was also brutal. And like you should expect to be like. You should expect to be grilled, and you should expect like any throwaway statement you made to be picked up on and then made the subject of the rest of the interview.
Yeah.
So don't make any statements overconfidently. Only say what you think you can justify with an argument. And then when they disprove you, as they inevitably will, you should just immediately admit that you were wrong about that.
Yes.
And I think if you do that and you're interested in the subject, then that will come through.
I definitely agree with you on that point. And I think it's very important to go into the interview quite humble. I mean, you want to be really prepared going into it. And that's why, in some sense, reading about general philosophy does help, just to have some understanding of what is maybe basically what is the nature of the mind, or what do you feel is knowledge, or what is personal identity. You don't need to understand everything and read loads of literature about it, but just to get the idea of possible things which may come up on the general philosophy paper is quite helpful in the interview. And also, I think, as you say, they're not expecting you to be able to defend a master thesis on philosophy in your interview. They're wanting you to figure out how you think, how you could develop ideas, how you could present yourself. And as a result, it's very important that I think one of a very interesting tip, and something which is very helpful, is to get a friend who's also interested in philosophy and just talk to them about philosophy for hours on end. And that is really helpful. Just challenge each other, develop each other's thoughts, and that would actually help a lot.
I think one thing about preparation is you shouldn't expect that they'll ask you about a mainstream question in philosophy. They almost definitely won't. They'll ask you about a question that you've like almost certainly never engaged with before, and they will have chosen the question because you've never engaged with it. So what they're testing you for is just critical thinking skills. So do philosophy, but don't just read about it. Like as you read it, you're practicing it and evaluate it. That's the preparation. It's critical thinking. It's not knowledge.
Definitely. I completely agree with you on that point. And I think that while it does help interacting with questions, you need to constantly think critically about what you're reading, because a lot of times when you're reading, you can start skimming through it and saying, well, okay, I just want to get a few quotes and I'll throw the book away afterwards, like I do with most of my essays. But in fact, you really want to wrestle with the ideas, and that wrestling will definitely prepare you further. Before we get off this video, are there any further closing remarks about philosophy of theology in general, or applying to Oxford?
You should definitely do it.
Yes. I mean, you never know that you're going to get in or not. I mean, everyone can get into Oxford, and it's definitely something that you should definitely try.
I mean, look, I was subscribed to Josh's channel before I came here, and look where that got me. I think
he's actually found himself in a room with me as well. You know, that's one thing. I never knew that you were subscribed to my channel until you texted me on that freshers page.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not really a big commenter, but. I was aware of your stuff.
How did you come across my channel? I've always been very curious.
I don't know. I assume it was just recommended to me. Maybe you did an interview with someone cool, and then I came across that. I don't know who it would have been. But I think it was probably just that. Like you did an interview, and then it was the second channel, Philosophy for All. Which you should definitely subscribe to.
Like and subscribe. Leave comments in the comments below if you want more of this guy. You want to talk about the psychophysical harmony. I'll nail that after maybe a few years of talking to you. But somewhere down the line, I'm definitely going to get him onto the Philosophy for All channel. Is there anything else you want to promote, or any projects you're doing that you want people to follow, or any more ideas?
Well, you should absolutely follow me on Twitter. My handle is @GoingAWOL. I've just started a Twitter a few days ago, and you should absolutely get on following me, because I'll have the spiciest content. Every time I publish something new, I'll post it. The next thing to be published, it should be out before Christmas, is my article, A New Way to Oppose Abortion. So definitely subscribe for spicy content.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining in. This video is going to be shortened into different random clips, and also the whole interview is going to come out on the Josh Yan channel. So make sure to like and subscribe. And before we end off, if you want more free application advice to the top unis in the world, then go check out the link below where you could join my free newsletter at Logos Education. Stay safe, my friends. See you soon. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.